Hey, we're back. All right. Uh, so I think in the time change, something has gone a little bit funny because I started the 30-second countdown 30 seconds before 8 o'clock, and it now says we've been live for over a minute. So somehow there is a time disability. And this time I don't think it's me. All right. So here we are. Let's see if we can get our comment section going. I'm really excited today. Hopefully, I'm going to hear from Alex. He's supposed to be joining me at some point here. Alex Teplish. We're going to be talking about AI. Uh, I'm going to let him talk about what he knows there, obviously. But uh, Alex is a writer, content creator, marketer. He's written some fabulous graphic novels, and I was working with him and found him to be just fascinating. Great talk about. Oh, he's here. I'm going to add Alex to the stage here in just a second. Hi, Alex. In fact, I got to throw my headphones on now too. I've found out. Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. And I hear you. So we don't have anybody here yet. So it's you and I. We're just going to talk about AI today. You know, I think before we get started, I think, God, I love that background you've got going there. That is just the best. A little different than my Weird Al and 2001 Star Wars. If you can see it, Daredevil, Beatles. You know, I've got my nerddom going on back here. Yours looks very futuristic sci-fi. It's cool. Hello, Chelsea. Welcome. Chelsea, you're in for a treat. We're going to be talking about AI a little bit today. I've got Alex Teplish with me. And Alex, why don't you, since this is something that's recorded, people can watch it later. Doesn't matter if people are in here watching currently, they will stream in. Good morning, Chinto. Why don't you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my career has revolved around technology for the most part. I've worked in all different industries the last 25 plus years, currently in the healthcare marketing industry. But on the side, I have many passion projects. I love to create, work with my creative side that I don't get to use as often at work. And I've authored a couple of graphic novels and love working with innovation, technology, playing with new technology, and seeing how far I could push the technology and do creative things with it.
Well, it's funny. My intro to you, you never know. I mean, when you meet people in a con setting, we met at ALA, uh, you never know what they do outside of that world because everything is so concentrated on that world. And to me, I think of you as a writer. That is what I think of you as. And then
Mm.
somebody who knows quite a bit about marketing and uh, AI, obviously. So it's funny when you start talking about, well, I'm in the healthcare industry and I do this. It's like that doesn't necessarily track in who I think of with you, but it's obviously who you are. Here, I'm going to actually put up a slide. I'm getting used to how some of these things work, Alex. So if I am ham fisted about it, there we go. My guest this week, Alex Teplish. And Alex, the other thing I'm going to do here, as long as we're talking and kind of getting going here, is you're going to love this. There we go. Go to Rabbit Vortex on Facebook. I put a nice little ticker along the bottom. So there we go. So that way we've got you getting promoted right here
Yeah.
with your AI stuff. So uh, first of all, with my comment crew here with Chelsea and Chinto, and hopefully Sarah will be here soon, and others. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I know this is a big topic. The very first question we ever had on this show, I mean, literally out of the gate, we started up. I said, "Okay, we're going to treat this like an AMA. Anyone have a question?" And Serena, who will probably be here as well, immediately, what do you know about AI and how does this affect me as an artist? And this is what I want to get into. So, Alex, uh, we'll go with this one. That one's better. Uh, You talked to me quite a bit about your use of AI as a creator. Uh, let's start there. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something they should be afraid of? Is this something they should embrace? What do you think?
Well, I see it like any other tool, Photoshop, video editing software, things that have been introduced over the years. Before we even get into that, talk about the term Luddites, which is a violent movement that happened in the early 19th century by textile workers against machinery as they were building factories to create fabrics. The people who were used to doing everything with their hands were protesting these types of new factories, and they would break in and violently destroy these factories, and they were just against progress. The same way I see AI, and there have been other movements throughout history just like that. That term actually became used for people who try to get in the way of innovation and technology. But going back to AI, I see it as a tool. I believe that humans are the gatekeepers of it. We need to use it wisely. Like I mentioned earlier, I've authored 2 graphic novels. Both were done in the traditional sense, or at least the traditional sense in the 2000s, at least. I did work with illustrators, traditional illustrators, but they still used computers to create their art. Sometimes they would use drawing pads, and they would use software to color it, do things like that. So it's not like they took out a set of paint and markers and colored it, right? They used
Right.
software to do that.
They use modern tools for it.
Modern tools, exactly. Same thing with AI. We don't want to just allow AI to just give us whatever it outputs and go with that. That's not the creative style, really. That's not a creative path. The creative path is really humans being the gatekeepers, putting in time to think through our prompts, to think through what we want to see on the screen, curate the proper output, and then take it further, put it into other software, uh, add on top of it, composite various images together. In some cases, I've had to zoom in onto the pixel and draw on top of the actual AI output because it wasn't exactly what I wanted out of the software. And then there's so much more. So I do see it as a creative process. It's very in the early infancy stages right now, and understandably, there are people who feel threatened by it. And there was a quote recently that said, "It won't be AI that take our jobs; it will be other people using AI that take the jobs."
Right. Right. I know that a big fear is when you start playing around with AI, that your stuff is no longer your stuff. You lose agency over your images and over what you've written. Is that something people should be afraid of? Is that something that you feel like, well, no, there are things you can do to prevent this?
Yeah, I mean, even going to the copyright law right now, there have been challenges against copyright where if you purely take the AI output and put it in as your own, technically you cannot copyright that. It's not yours. But there are tools now where you can create components with the AI. You can combine it with your own illustrations or other things, just like a collage or other types of work, video editing where people use stock footage. It's not necessarily the stock footage is not necessarily their own, but once it's combined, it becomes something new. It's something that's transformative or generative, and that's really it's all about putting the pieces together and creating the final work that then becomes someone's creation and unique piece.
It's interesting that you said it's kind of like using stock footage, because stock footage is uh, you pay for it, or you're using public domain footage, maybe attribution. Is that what you see the use of AI being something where, hey, if I use AI, as long as I attribute it properly, as long as it's free use, the problem once again is, does AI pull from the collective pool and it's no longer yours, and now other people can use it?
Right. Well, the way that AI, generative AI works is that it does pool. There are different platforms, right? So Photoshop or Adobe, they've cleared everything that they have crawled, let's say, in technical terms, and they have the rights to use that in their database or in their original collection. But the way it really works is that it takes all of the different images, breaks them down into something called noise, which is like the old school TVs when it didn't get a reception. You really don't see anything. But after collecting millions or even billions or trillions of different images and breaking it down into the noise and connecting that to a large language model with keywords, it can then reverse engineer the noise into something new and unique that's still similar to the original, but not a copy.
Okay.
So that's the part that shows that it doesn't store all of the original works of the artists. It only stores the noise and the keywords. Um, and then with that said, once it is converted to the noise, they dispose of the original images that they crawled. They just make a temporary copy. I attribute that to it's similar to if a talented person, goes to museums or art galleries, or even watches things on television or anywhere, comic books, and then sits down and creates something new based on their memory. Now imagine there's a savant, an artist savant, that has a great memory, has a photographic memory. Technically, they can copy the exact image just from their memory. But if they create something new that's similar, but not necessarily, or they create something new that's similar to 100 different things they've seen, they've now transformed it into something of their own. And that's the same way that AI is working now.
Okay. Okay. I want to share what Chinto said here. It's going to be two things, and I'll share the whole thing. I don't think it's people trying to get in the way of technology, but people fearing that they will lose their means of income. We're talking like artists at cons and people that make a living as a graphic artist. We live in a capitalist world, and those who hold capital will do what they can to squeeze the most profit out of any technology, meaning if they can eliminate workers and have a machine do the writing, the art, the art, the creating, which I get that. I definitely get that. There is that fear. I mean, if you look at Netflix right now, there's a movie on, I think John Cena's in it. And I was reading a review of it, and they said that the script was written almost entirely with AI, and it makes no sense. As soon as you step back from it and try to read what it's saying, it goes, this makes no sense. But writers were eliminated from the process. And people that worked that hard for that long to get there, now they're putting things on Netflix where they don't have to pay a writer and they just throw it into an AI machine. Now, wait, he's still got more. So it is valid fear, even though there is nothing to stop it, but embrace it and learn how we can use it for the benefit of the creators. There we go, Chinto. That's, I think, Alex, what you and I are both saying here. It is a useful tool. We don't all have to be John Henry taking hammers to bang our way through a mountain. There are tools that will help you get there, that will make it so you can do it longer and more effectively, even though the story of John Henry makes you go, yeah, I'm John Henry. Yeah, well, I don't think anyone wants to destroy their body banging through a mountain. And I think AI is that sledgehammer that helps you not have to do that.
Yeah, and I really don't think that they're actually getting rid of writers. I think maybe they're reducing the amount of time they need the writer involved.
Okay.
But still, it's not going to be some network executive that outputs a script and then says, "All right, let's just go with that." There's writers that have to build up the components, that have to then screen what's output, then go into the output and edit based on what their vision is. So it's still a craft. It's just more efficient now with using these tools. It's hard for any creator to look at a blank screen and start with that. But when you have an idea and you could generate some concepts from that idea and then take those concepts further with your own creativity, that's really the proper use, and using it like a tool, not necessarily eliminating the jobs, but creating all the jobs to become more efficient.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. So this is actually why I wanted to talk to you about it. I mean, other than I truly enjoy talking to you. One of the things that you had talked about when we were standing there, you showed me some of your projects, things that you were playing around with, which you can see at Rabbit Vortex on Facebook. You see it scrolling along the bottom there. So the thing that struck me, you told me this idea. You went, I'm not going to give the idea. They can look on there for it, whatever. But let's take something random, like you were taking ideas, and you said, like, okay, take the idea of the Mandalorian, and you're going to throw this into it and say it's the Mandalorian, and instead of being in the Star Wars universe, what does it look like if the Mandalorian is in modern day New York? And you start adding your ideas onto that, or you let AI kind of generate like the what if the Mandalorian was in New York, and you kind of an outline to work from. It's a spark. It's something that you can say, hey, this got my ideas flowing. And I don't see a problem with that. I think when you take exactly what it says, it's kind of like if you copy and paste Wikipedia articles and you throw it out there and say, this is my new book. Well, guess what? It's not your new book.
Right.
Same thing with AI, but it is a tool that you can gather ideas from or spark creativity from. And that was what I found so interesting with you when you were showing me some of these concepts. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And these are the kind of concepts that, like, I'll think up an idea. Now I can get a visualization, or I can get an outline and start working from there. So when you're talking about using it as a tool, that's truly what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with storyboarding the idea. Sometimes you have ideas, and I've had plenty that have been posted on this page, on the Facebook page, Rabbit Vortex, where I wouldn't necessarily go and hire a team of artists, nor do I have the budget for every idea that I have. May not explore every idea in depth, may just create a small storyboard, share it with people, but not necessarily do much with it. But then I have other ideas where I'm now taking them into first starting with creating the imagery, the storyboard, now taking these images into another software, another AI tool that animates some of these images, then creating music, sound effects, voiceovers, and combining it all in video editing software. So I've now spent time and a workflow around putting together a short video that portrays this full idea with all the different aspects of it.
Now, once again, I might sound like a broken record, but I got to ask this question. So you come up with a concept like this, you've got an original idea, and you start storyboarding it on there. This is, I think, where the fear pressure point is. Those ideas, then, do they become part of the AI collective, and now they're out there, and you don't really own them?
It really depends on which tool you're using. Most of the tools are not taking the creation, the output, and putting it back into the learning.
Okay.
Maybe the text to text ones like ChatGPT, that may be doing that. But otherwise, Midjourney, and some of these other tools, Runway, some of these other tools, they're pure output that you keep. And depending on their policies, you may not necessarily have the copyright at the moment, but you own that footage or that imagery. Now, if you take 10 different pieces of AI output as images and then go into a tool like Photoshop, composite them, change some things, add a title, create a poster out of that, or some other derivative, now you could potentially copyright it. And I think that that's where the law becomes a gray area, and it's still in the early stages, and it will be challenged.
Sure. Our comment section has gone very silent, but I know people are listening. Does anybody have any questions for Alex? Because he is a creator. He is a graphic novel creator. He is a futurist. He's looking ahead and thinking about this stuff. He is a great resource for this. Does anybody have any questions? I know there's always an awkward pause while we figure this out, but
I just want to add that I'm
Yeah.
working on other projects. One of them is another graphic novel.
okay.
Another one is a potential 2D animated feature film, both of which I would want to work with traditional illustrators. But I am using AI to storyboard the ideas, to provide them with palette and color concepts and backgrounds and character explorations. But then the illustrators will still have their jobs and will take that and take it even further in some cases, things that AI can't do at the moment.
It reminds me of like when you submit a children's book. Uh, you not only have the text, but what they ask you to submit is essentially not a drawn storyboard. Some do, but usually it's a description. Like you're describing every page, every panel
Mhm.
as much as you can, and it sounds like you're using this tool to help you create something that they can grip onto. Uh, it's just another tool for that, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly. And even ChatGPT, like I've seen some people where they just put one sentence in there and then take the output, pure output.
Yeah.
And I don't know if most people have noticed, but after a while, you start to see that ChatGPT has a certain style of its own if you don't give it enough of your own
Right.
ideas.
You can kind of tell.
Yeah, you can tell it uses the words embark, thrilling, journey. Those are very common words. And when
Wait a minute. I use those all the time. Uh-oh.
right. But I'm actually now starting to see or hear people using all the words in one sentence in their keynote speaking. So I could tell right away, oh, that sounds like they just took pure output from ChatGPT and didn't even make their own edits to it. But after a while of using these tools, you realize that you need to put your own creative spin to the output and take it even further.
Yeah, I've told the story before. I don't know if I've told it on this show. And Serena, I see your comments. Chelsea, I see your comments. We're going to put those on in a second so Alex can see those too. Uh, I had a class I was teaching, and one of my students, uh, this is right as ChatGTP was hitting, and I helped him get hired by an Instagram influencer to do some writing about baseball stuff. And this guy liked him to run it through like a ChatGTP to put his voice into it. It was interesting. So it's like almost like ghostwriting, using it that way.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I gave him an assignment. This kid turns in this paper, and what he didn't realize is it went through my teacher software, and it came back and said 100% AI.
Hmm.
And I had to have the discussion with the class that, even though there's no policy on it, I'm not accepting this. This is a zero because it's not what you've written. And it was interesting. This kid said, no, no, no. I wanted to test this. And he had right there with him, he goes, I've got my original here. Run it through. You'll see none of it is ChatGTP. And it was really interesting. The software picked up everything that was not his original. And I think that's something else that people don't realize that are using it thinking they can get away with something. Well, you can't. Now, there's lots of questions here. Now the things have started pouring in. So Serena's the one I mentioned at the top of the show, who was the first person to ask about AI. The first question we
Hmm.
had on the show. Uh, Serena, the problem with AI isn't really the output, but the original input. They need a way to credit original art since they know exactly who they stole from, the compensation for it. Even if it's a fraction of a penny for every image used, then they could copyright. Uh, Wait, there's
I
more to it, but that would involve people volunteering their art to the program to utilize. Okay, what are your thoughts on that,
do.
Alex?
I do agree with that, and I believe that the Adobe product in Photoshop, their product's a little bit more advanced, where you can actually select areas of your image and circle an area or draw whatever shape you want, and say add a rock over here, add a mountain over here, add a person, a little girl over here, and it will generate that in this spot and make it look like the rest of the image. But I do agree that it would be great for artists to be attributed to these works or to be compensated.
Yeah,
But I do have a slight different stance. I think that even if the AI was trained purely on public domain works, we would still be able to get much of the output that we're getting now, because there's enough of that out there, the public domain, that would be able to train. I mean, maybe we wouldn't be able to get Spider-Man out of there because that's copyrighted, and if their owners don't want to share that intellectual property, then that maybe that wouldn't be the output. But there's so much out there in the public domain and works of art from the history that we would be able to get much of similar output that we're getting now. One other thing, the way I see the future of this technology evolving is exactly what Serena's saying, where the blockchain will be at the back end. where every artist or any creator, whatever you create, whether it's an image, music, your voice, another film, this source will be attributed in the blockchain. And then as soon as any software uses any decent sized component of that original work, they would get compensated, even if it's pennies. But then in bulk, it does add up and pay the creators, as long as they're alive. And maybe there will be laws. The laws will evolve. But I could see how the future of creation will also be many mashups and remixes of previous IPs. And now IP will get compensated for their original work. And that will then empower illustrators to create things with their hands originally, upload it, and now other people all over the world can create derivatives of that, their own versions, their own mashups, and then everyone gets compensated in the process.
Interesting. It's kind of like how the music industry has been
Yeah,
evolving,
exactly.
but it's a visual medium of that. I think about like Spotify, how I have friends that are musicians that say they get a sliver when you play. They're upset about it, but before you weren't getting anything because it was all getting traded for free. So there
Exactly.
is at least a motion that way, and it sounds like the same thing with art, and I'd assume with words, we've got the same thing here. There's that potentiality. Okay, we've got two more I want to show on here. One, Pierre, output should always be vetted from ChatGTP or Gemini. And that's very valid. Pierre is my analytics buddy. So of course he's going to go right there where we're vetting things, and he's right. And it's similar to what I was talking about with my classes. Here's a little bit longer one. This was Chelsea, and I have not read this yet. Lots of people, mostly artists, consider using AI to create images to be theft or taking away from artists. But the times I've used AI have been to create short trailers for my social media about my books because I don't have money to pay an artist to create them for me all the time. I've stopped doing this for the last year because of that concern. What do you think about using AI like that? And this actually is a question that I want to see people blow up in this chat, because I know Chinto, I know Serena, you guys are artists. How do you feel about this? And there is in the middle there that paying the artist thing is really tricky. I think when people get it for free, they start thinking, well, it should all be free. But there is an expense that maybe you can't use, or that you can't use this stuff. So ChatGTP or whatever AI is helping you with that visual. What do you think about that, Alex?
Yeah, I think that the value of hand created works will go up versus things that are AI output, because it's a lot more efficient, less time consuming. So the value of it can be less. Just like a priceless piece of art that hangs in a museum is different than a digital work that someone created on their computer in Photoshop. Um, I I do believe that this will create a new explosion of creativity. It will empower. It's called the democratization of creativity. It will empower a lot more people to get their ideas and visualizations out there, and then do something further with them. Where in the past it took large budgets. I've worked on two graphic novels. It was very expensive to pay an artist and inefficient. And in many cases, it's sad to say, a lot of artists are not as reliable to output on a regular basis like someone else would in an office environment. So you end up having a lot of frustration. Not to say that it's not appreciated, but there are obstacles in working in the traditional way. This will allow many different people all around the world to create more works of art. And we can call it art. We don't have to call it art. Some people don't want to call it art. That's okay. There are creative output, and they are new ideas. Yes, there are a lot of people who are just kind of creating other versions of traditional characters, but then there's so much more to it. And I think there's this other genre where you can create photorealistic visualizations, and they're not necessarily competing with traditional illustrations. It's this, and you wouldn't be able to stage those visualizations as a photo. It would be too expensive to create the masks, the makeup, the lighting.
Right, right.
You just wouldn't be able to do it. But now you can actually output that as a book and use those kinds of visualizations where they look like it's real life, but you just wouldn't be able to recreate that in actual life, real life.
A couple more comments in here. I'm not holding my breath that illustrators and visual artists never get credited, unlike motion and music. Yeah, I mean, hasn't that been a problem forever? Same thing with writers. I mean, a lot of writers complain about the same thing. Yeah, the ones that get credited and get paid, it can be pretty sweet. And then there are other people who are like, man, I've been grinding away on this. Like I know people that have written on shows that say I get paid less than the guy making my Starbucks, and I'm putting out massive input and really putting my art into it. Will they ever get compensated the right way? I don't know. I thought this was interesting too. My awakening from this AI thing is to create more traditional art and ink business brushes, and then learn older forms of bookbinding, which actually I think matches this.
Mhm.
This is a modern tool. Going back to those older tools, it's the same thing that happened with animation when everything became 3D modeling, and all of a sudden we're seeing a movement where there's a lot of people that are trying to use traditional 2D cells. They might clean this up, do a little coloring, color correcting with computers, but they're trying to go back to that traditional form of animation. And I think that's where we start getting some really interesting things. It's kind of like you got to break the system first.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, for you guys, my friends that are artists and writers and that, it's scary because what if it breaks the other way? Okay, let's see what Pierre has another one. The usage of AI in a creation needs to be referenced in universal way so that people know where to check, like the nutrition label. Yeah, I think that comes down to the laws, right, Alex?
Well, I think that if it was a derivative of two or three images, you could say that it's pretty easy. But a lot of this output is really a derivative of millions of images. So how can you possibly create a list of credits? It could be down to a few pixels of something.
Sure.
It's working similar to how the human brain works, where if you see a million dogs or even 1,000 dogs, and then you go sit down and draw another dog, it's not a copy of any of the dogs you've seen. It's just something from your memory that you've now combined. And that's where the issue starts to get in of crediting artists. That's very difficult to do in this scenario.
I think
I
where
did.
the
I
the
did want to
peer
add one more. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to add a couple of things. We're talking about people losing jobs, and I want to quote Bruce Lee, who said, "Be like water." And I do think that in any time, whether it's today, 50 years ago, people need to be like water. You need to adapt with the times. You need to learn the tools. You can't. If you resist, you get left behind. So you need to, if you want to be successful in life, you need to constantly adapt, learn, and use the tools, adapt them. You could still be a creator. Like I actually enjoy illustrating. I've been wanting to get into wood carving. These are things I want to do just for the pure enjoyment of them, not necessarily for to make money. But I'll still learn the new tools. And one other thing I wanted to mention: there's a documentary called "Everything Is a Remix." I'm not affiliated with that at all, but I really highly recommend everyone to watch it. And the creator of that documentary, there's a few versions of it, one from 2014, I believe, and one recent. He analyzes old music, old movies, and shows direct connections between examples like Star Wars have not copies, but similar scenes to old samurai movies, or modern day music having similar melodies to older music.
Sure.
And in some of those cases, I would even say that the artists themselves, especially in music, doesn't even realize that they're actually copying or mimicking something they've heard. It gets into their brain, then they're on their instruments recreating it, recreating music, and it just comes out in a similar way. And I have a feeling that many times that they're not directly copying what they've heard.
Yeah. I'm reading what Shinto right here. There's more. Yeah. You've got my brain exploding here. I'm thinking about this. Uh, you think about modern cinema. How many of the auteurs, like a Tarantino or a Robert Rodriguez, or uh, I'm naming certain guys, somebody like Villeneuve, they are taking a lot of them. You'll start seeing you can take almost frames, and they do side by side comparisons, and they're either directly taking that and doing an homage, or it's lodged in there the person standing at the door looking in, it's been used a million times, this certain framing and everything, whatever the root was that started it, it's in the collective unconscious now, and it gets used over and over and over. I know that's a real generic
Mhm.
idea, but it's really interesting. Music, it definitely, it happens. Now, when you cross too close to it, you fly a little too close to the sun, that's when there's a copyright
Mhm.
infringement. But at the same time, when you think about music, you think about how using samples and all that has become so prominent. It used to be people just flat out stole stuff. There was a James Brown drum lick that at one point they said it was used in like 50% of the recordings in the 90s or something, one little
Mhm.
lick. And in the beginning, there was no way to compensate. It was just, hey, this is free use. We're just using this thing. And it was like, well, no, that is not free use. But at the time, there weren't the laws in place. They didn't have a way of analyzing it other than somebody listening. So we've got that same situation here. Okay, Chinto, My Awakening. Nope, we read that one. Here we go. There will be a brushback to more, a pushback to more traditional methods. IKEA cheap disposable furniture has brought a want for craftsmanship back and handmade furniture. Very true. IKEA is a great example. Is there not a place for both? There is. When IKEA hit, there are people, just like fast fashion too. Fast fashion, like my brain is Zara. People see that and they're like, well, man, this is going to kill. And it did. It knocked out a lot of anchor stores, the big guys, the big retailers. It knocked them out of the park because they couldn't compete. But the reality is, Zara is one piece of the puzzle. There is still handmade. There's still really cool shops that aren't doing fast fashion. There's room for everybody. It's just a matter of that learning curve in the beginning, the growing pains that we're all going through. And then let's do this one. Unfortunately, we can't fear change. Like it's been said, we adapt or quit because the progress potential won't be stopped by just complaining about it. True. True. I think the bottom line, Alex, is that you're saying it's a useful tool. It's not up to us necessarily to push back against it as much as we need to keep figuring out where the laws should be, what's right, what's wrong, use our own personal ethical code. There are people that are going to rip off and that are going to do it outside of that ethical code, but I don't think that's the norm. I think it's a really useful tool. I really do.
Yep, I do too. And I think that the one thing people should not do is use AI and then try to make it sound like they did it by hand, or try basically not admit that they use these tools, which is something I don't do.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key. If people know that, if you're walking through a craft market and you know that this art or this creation was created by AI or a derivative of AI and the person's involvement, while something else here was done by hand, you'll value it differently, and you may want to collect something that was done by hand because it has that much more value.
Yeah. Yeah. A bunch of artists I know are starting to glaze their artwork, the artwork they put online, to poison AI programs that take them without permission. And I think that's really it. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. Uh, what I see the problem with is they're in fear. This is not what I see the problem with, but they're in fear that AI is just going to take their stuff and now they don't own it. Now people are just doing whatever they want with it. I know, Sarita, that's a legit fear for you. But Alex, what you're saying is, and even Pierre, like it's getting monitored. Like that's not really how it's going to work. Am I correct?
I mean, I have heard of tools where artists can protect their own art so that it's not usable by the AI engines. So if they want to do that, that's fine. Nothing against that. I still think that much of the public domain and the non-protected art is enough to train an AI to output a lot of what we want to do. You're still not going to be able to necessarily, like I said, using Spider-Man as an example, tell AI to create a Spider-Man comic book and then go sell it. You don't own the IP. So technically, they can still sue you regardless of how easy it was to create. It's all about creating new ideas, um, even if they're mashups of something of an IP, but they're so derivative. And there's also part of the copyright law is called fair use, and Saturday Night Live or Mad Magazine, they've used that copyright law where they can create a parody of something.
Right.
Everyone knows this is not the original IP, but it looks similar, and it's in some cases it's humorous, in other cases it's dark, but it is a completely new creation, a new idea based off of the derivative.
Yeah. This is a tough subject. Like I keep going back and forth on what I think about this. I do agree it's a useful tool. I do think that what you're saying, Alex, using the older IP that is public domain, free use, I think that is how it should be used. The problem is when you have an artist like Chinto or Serena, they're creating original pieces. They're afraid, I'm going to create a character, let's say, or a setting, and it AI gobbles it up, and now somebody can take that and just completely take parts of it and make it just say like, hey, this is my original work, when indeed it's not. And now they've lost out on this IP that people have not even gotten a chance to see. That's, I think, where one of the fears comes in. When you're creating something, you spend, as you know, as a writer, you spend a lot of time putting your heart into it. You put a lot of thought into it. It kind of consumes you for a while, and to have that just used by somebody else before you've even had a chance to let it make its mark is a tricky thing. I have a couple of friends that have done a really interesting. They did a print that, now this is not an AI thing, but this is like the real world outside of the computer thing. They made this one. It's I don't want to say anybody's names or anything, but they created this print that you see at Comic-Cons a lot, and I'll see it online, and they're always fighting copyright with this. As I see, you'll go through the cons, and if they're not at the con, I'll see tables that have that exact same print, but they say it's them that made it. So they're constantly having to retain their IP. It sucks. And here, this is going out to the world. It's faster. It's more of a wildfire. Let's say you create your own avatar type, you like this big, fully realized, and somebody's playing in the sandbox before you've even made the sandbox public. I think that's where some of that fear comes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to encourage the traditional artists to use both, use their own hands and creativity like they have been, but adopt some of these tools so that they can also do their work more efficiently.
I see Michael is in the chat now. Michael, we've been talking about AI. If you read the comments, there's definitely fears in there of people taking IP. You know, you draw something, it goes into AI, those bits and pieces. Now somebody could create something off of what you've created, and you're left going, hey, that, do it in the style of Chito Gonzalez. All of a sudden, it's a thing where somebody's creating, like you said, Spider-Man in Chito Gonzalez's style. It's like, well, you're kind of stealing my soul, and that's a fear. Michael, you do a lot with AI as well. If you want to jump in here and give us some of your thoughts, I think actually, Alex, you'll appreciate this. I think Michael's going to be my guest next week. So here, let's see what Chinto said. I stopped fearing it, and I'm just creating now, knowing that even before AI, people stole ideas, and if we live in fear, it will paralyze our creativity.
Exactly.
That is spot on. Spot on. I can give an example from my world of podcasting in that. Maybe even told this story before, because, as you get older, you tell the same story over and over. A friend of mine is well known in the podcast world and an expert. And I saw him on a thread of, one of those nerdy threads that only the podcast guys like me are on. So there's 10 of us, right? And somebody in there wrote, well, should I be putting my podcast on YouTube? And he immediately jumped in. That's not a podcast. Don't do it. This could get stolen, blah, 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 blah. And I jumped in and I said, he is off his rocker. Be on YouTube. It's another tool. What is your main goal, which is you want people to hear what you're having to say, or you want to share information? Why would you cut that off over a term? And I think this is a similar thing. Why would you cut off a tool? Just be careful how you use it. Just be careful what you're using and what you're doing. So when you said there is software that can protect the art, well, maybe that's where the efforts should be put in, making that better so that artists can freely put things up and know they're protected, right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it could be that that's only something that's needed right now in the infancy by some artists. I do think that eventually artists will potentially be compensated, but like I said, if you've seen thousands of pieces of art and then you go create something new, but they're based on ideas from all the art you've seen, who are you paying? Who are you attributing really? What are you attributing it to? I got this little spec from this idea, and then how many artists do you see at cons, traditional artists that are recreating IP that they don't have rights to, but they're still selling their art, right? Just because it's their own, it's being done by hand, but they're still drawing characters that they don't necessarily have any involvement with.
Well, there's the character thing, and then there's also the artist's soul. There's the style. If they're
Right.
mimicking Darwin Cook, I mean, there's a thing of you can be inspired by it. Your art kind of looks like Darwin Cook or looks like Jack Kirby. But if you're just putting it out there like this is my art and it's clearly ripping off Jack Kirby, I think that's where the line is. And see, when you're selling at a con, you're selling to X amount of people. When the Spider-Man IP is not going to be stolen by some guy making a print at a con. But if before Spider-Man is known, a known quantity,
Mm.
if somebody's able to take that, put it out there as their own, that is very different, especially when you have, once again, worldwide reach.
Yep.
Michael wrote, now Michael's a marketing guy. I own Stormio AI. People can build websites, funnels, email graphics, and even have conversations with AI. Yeah, you know what? Once again, this goes back to it being a tool. Last week, I talked all about how to create your content for a year by using ChatGTP. You type in, you play around with the sentence. I need 12 ideas for a marketing newsletter, and you see what it says. Now, if you take that, copy and paste it, and put it on your page, that's very different than taking it, looking at it, and going, hey, I like some of these ideas. I'm going to use these as inspiration and create something wholly new out of it. There's no difference in picking up a book and looking at what they had to say. What are the chapter headings? And, oh, hey, I'm getting inspired by these chapter headings. Or by analyzing somebody's Instagram page and going, oh, I like what they're doing by holding the book or using their hand. And I use that. I filter that out in mine. But once again, if you're stealing their exact style, that's a problem. Here we go. Oh no, Alex opened the fan art Pandora's box. I find it funny how fan art creators are complaining about AI stealing their art. It makes me laugh because fan art is still stolen art, in my opinion, if it is used for profit. Yeah, I mean, it's a slippery slope, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that fan art will become a new layer to creation. For example, I have one of my favorite concepts, and I'm working on an animated version right now. A trailer, a conceptual trailer, is a fan art off of Planet of the Apes. I've loved the originals. I love the new ones. I love the whole concept. I'm adding a new spin to it based on my own background. I was actually born in the Soviet Union. So I created a concept called communism on the Planet of the Apes. And you could see that on my page in Rabbit Vortex.
And it's really good.
Thank you. And those are just the storyboard visuals for now. But what I'm putting together now is a trailer, as if it's a real series, a real television series or a Netflix series, and with voiceover, with sound effects, with music, with animated apes, in that world, in that universe. So that's turning into an actual workflow. It's not pure output. There's a lot of components to it, and now I have to put it all together. And ultimately, it's still my idea. I don't think it's been done. Yes, Planet of the Apes has been done, but this is a mashup of that. And just like for the last couple of decades or several decades, people have been into remakes, or at least the studios have been making all these remakes. Now it will become in the creator's hands to create remakes or reboots with their own spins on it, with their own vision.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a couple more comments here. I see Serena has a big one about fan art. Getting to it. In regards to copyright infringement type thing via AI, that's hard. But if AI creates something, technically it's not yours. So can you copyright it? This is where the earlier part of the discussion we were talking about what the laws allow and what they don't. Um, if it creates it, but it's stealing X amount from another art form, that's where I think the artists are really scared. And the copywriting, so you've got this Planet of the Apes idea. It's a great idea, but now it's out in this collection of AI potentially. So if I go in and I start playing around and I'm saying Soviet Union, Planet of the Apes, is it going to take a significant amount of your idea there?
Well, if it becomes publicly known that I've created something like that, and you basically want to do the exact same thing, then that's where I still think that we're in the infancy of this technology. Once there's this other layer, and let's say it's based on blockchain, where you can attribute the idea to a person. Now, even if you decide to create another layer of your own on top of my idea, it'll still be attributed. But if
In the
you're
blockchain, it's
attributing,
still attributed to you. Yeah.
yes, but if you create something that's inspired by 1,000 different people, then you've really created something pretty new. It
Sure.
it becomes so granular that it's no longer any one of those people's idea, and that's kind of how AI works. And it's also like you said, books. If I read many books, and that's what they recommend to any writer, is to read a lot of books. If you read so many books, eventually you could write well on your own, but you're really inspired by all these other things. I mean,
Yeah.
if you take a baby, they won't be able to create art. They have to see, they have to experience life, even if they're already grown, but they haven't really experienced the world. They've been locked in a room their whole life. They really won't be able to do much. Maybe you give them a tool and they'll maybe draw a stick figure, but until they experience what came before them, they won't be able to create new and derivative creations in art.
Okay, let's see what Serena said here. There's a whole gray area in fan art. The companies imply that artists can sell fan art, but they retain the rights to revoke that implied permission at any time. When an artist spends hours on a picture only to have someone put another character's face on it in 2 minutes in AI and start selling it, that's basically stealing hours of time. Yeah, Serena, I mean, you are absolutely right. And this is, I think that, like you said, the gray area that we're kind of poking at. I think, Alex, your position on it makes a lot of sense. It's just we need kind of laws and that to control that, right?
It's hard to say control because we're talking. I'm also not a big supporter of heavy regulation of anything, really. You
Yeah,
know,
no, I get it. I'm not either. I said the word and I'm like, it's not really what I mean, but
yeah, I hear you. I think that what we're seeing now is basically creating these more efficient brains. Um, like I said, if it's really truly something new, it's not like you're copying a face and putting it onto, or a head and putting it onto your own another body. It's really recreating it from a very fuzzy image of all these millions of things that have been seen before.
yeah. Here, I'm going to show. Michael just put this. Like I said, he's going to be a guest, I believe, next week. Hopefully, it'll work out. You can also talk to Mike about this. Alex, you can see along the bottom here.
Yeah.
These are ways to contact these guys if you want to have more of a discussion about AI. Uh, it's something that people just have a lot of questions about, and I know that I'm fairly uneducated about it. I'm reading a lot, I'm asking people a lot, but it takes a while before it all gets in there the right way. And frankly, it's in its infancy. You know, let's see. If only our Congress would sit down and pass regulations on AI and not waste time banning TikTok. But here we are. Yes. Uh, but isn't that more important than any of? No, it's not. This is actually an issue that should be really thought out and addressed, just like we've seen a number of times. I remember when Napster hit. My father-in-law worked in music licensing, and he was just up in arms, and he just kept saying like, "Nope, it's crap," and everybody that touches it should be in jail because they're stealing. And it was like, well, yeah, they're stealing, but this is the infancy of something completely different. And we've got to, rather than shut it down and kick the door on it, we need to figure out what is this and why is this such an attractive thing to our brain and why does it work for us? Let's see what Serena says. Our Congress is way too old to even understand what's going on with these
That's
programs.
true. That
What
is
do you
true.
mean? We've all seen Mitch McConnell, and he's a spry young man that, yeah, okay. Jokes, right? Okay, so Alex, we're going to run out of time here. Why don't you tell people about your books? Because that's important too. Alex has a couple of really fascinating projects. I would like you to talk about that. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But go ahead. What are your graphic novels?
Yeah, so I have two completely different graphic novels. One is science fiction based on the ancient astronaut theory. For anybody who's familiar with the show on History Channel, the Ancient Aliens, I actually created this before that show was a thing, and I was inspired also by a theorist and his own books, his nonfiction books, and I included him as a character in my graphic novel. I worked with traditional artists and also computer artists. No AI was used for it, and it retells the Book of Genesis from an extraterrestrial perspective. So that's called In the Beginning, the Epic of the Anunnaki. And people can check out some samples of the art and the trailer and purchase the book at inthebeginningthebook.com.
Yeah, and I have another show. I have a secret show on a secret YouTube or a secret Facebook page called Graphic Tales. Alex, I'm going to invite you back on there because we're talking ancient aliens then and the Anunnaki. Okay. I'll have you on Graphic Tales at some point. So much fun. Now the other book, the other book we actually got to know each other over.
Mm-hmm. The other book is a lot more important to myself, my family, to humanity. It's based on my grandfather's testimony to the Shoah Foundation, founded by Steven Spielberg, about his experience surviving through the Holocaust in the Soviet Union. And it tells his exact story as he told it on video in his 3-hour video interview. I did a lot of research to verify the historical accuracy, to also inform my artists on historically accurate scenes, everything down to the guns and the helmets and the uniforms. I wanted it to be as close to reality as possible. It's a very tragic time. It doesn't only concern the Jewish people. And I do think that everyone needs to learn about this part of history because we could potentially repeat it again or make mistakes, fall into traps, especially propaganda. And it's a 2-part book. It's a hardcover book. The first half is a graphic novel memoir, and the second half are all the historical contexts that I've summarized for the reader to answer questions that may come out of my grandfather's story.
It's a fascinating project. It was just a gorgeous looking book. I encourage everybody to definitely check it out. If you know somebody, it would make a great gift if you know somebody that'd be interested in it, or at least to have it on your shelf yourself. And we will put links in the show notes for that. And I will also have Alex on another show. I'll have you on Alley Chats at some point, and we'll talk all about that project that we can get a little more in depth on the project itself. And then there's another secret project that is so secret that I'm not even going to say the name, but I invited Alex when I talked to him this week that will involve that book as well. So, Alex, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for all the information. You can get in touch with Alex. We'll put it in the show notes. You also saw it on here. Let me go back to that, where you can look at his AI Facebook page at Rabbit Vortex. And then Alex, I have one more thing for you. Chinto's comment, I was sold on Alex when he said Planet of the Communist Apes. Me too. I love Planet of the Apes. I love to talk. I love that there's a graphic novel of Kong versus the Planet of the Apes. I'm like, more apes, more of this type of story. I love it. So yeah, I'm with you too, Chinto. Alex, thank you so much. And where can people get in touch with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook primarily. I'm also on Instagram, although I use it a little less. My name is Alex Teplish, Teplish. LinkedIn is preferred. That's the best business networking for myself. And I also didn't mention the link or the name of my second book. It's called Survivor Aaron's Story. That's the one that I'm currently working on adapting into an animated feature film. And you can check it out at survivoraaronstory.com.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Rob.
Alex, thank you so much. I'm just going to pimp two things as we're ending here. Join my newsletters. I'm on I've got Pour Over Marketing, and I also have one all about podcasting called Mic Drop. They're both on Substack. And even though I haven't put too much on there, more is coming. And you may not know this, but New Media Lab has a YouTube channel, and I am going to start putting these videos there. And I've got some other video content that's going to be really cool. So New Media Lab on YouTube at New Media Lab Pod. There's also the New Media Lab podcast, which I don't know. I have, 50 different interviews with people. It's a show that I've hated for a while because I never felt the format was good. I like this format. Well, guess what? I fixed that format. So going forward, we're going to have a new show that's a lot of fun. And in theory, Michael, if you confirm this, next week, my special guest, Michael S. Copeland. We're talking marketing stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. So there you go. Follow us next week. And coming soon will be the, I believe, Thursday night edition of this, which is called Happy Hour. I'm not a drinker, so it's going to be more coffee. But there we go. Once again, Alex, thank you so much for being on. Truly a pleasure. I'll get you on all those other things so you can follow along the adventures of Alex Teplish and his getting a movie made and all the graphic novels and AI through my various podcasts. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Rob.
And everybody, thank you again. We will see you next week. If you have questions in the meantime, write to me. You know where. Oh, yep. Michael says he's confirmed. We will see Michael Copeland next week. Thanks, everybody.